Jeffrey Dahmer, also known as the Milwaukee Cannibal, was an American serial killer who, between 1978 and 1991, killed and dismembered 17 young men. Dahmer lured his victims from gay bars, malls, and bus stops with promises of sex or money. However, when they went back to his apartment in Milwaukee, he laced their drinks with drugs before strangling them when they fell unconscious. He then defiled their corpses and took Polaroid pictures of them in suggestive positions so he could relive the experience at a later date. Dahmer disposed of some of the bodies by dissolving them in acid in a drum he had in his bedroom. With some of his later victims, Dahmer started developing rituals and even attempted crude lobotomies, drilling a hole into the skull of Errol Lindsay whilst he was still alive and injecting him with muriatic acid before strangling him. If all this wasn't bad enough, he also ate the flesh of some of his victims. Dahmer first started his murder spree whilst living with his parents and then later with his grandmother, and had killed 5 people before he moved into apartment 213 at 924 North 25th Street, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. A further 12 victims were killed in his apartment, making a total of 17. Dahmer was finally caught on July 22, 1991, after one of his intended victims, Tracy Edwards, escaped Dahmer's apartment, still handcuffed, and flagged down a police car. When officers arrived at Dahmer's apartment, they were not expecting to find what they did. A total of 4 human heads were found in the kitchen, 7 skulls, some painted in the bedroom. In the refrigerator were 2 human hearts and a portion of arm muscle. In the freezer was a whole torso as well as other human remains found in a bag. Elsewhere in the apartment were 2 complete skeletons and other body parts, and inside a 57-gallon blue drum there were more torsos dissolving in acid. After his arrest, Dahmer readily admitted to all 17 murders. At his trial, he was convicted of 15 murders in Wisconsin and 1 in Ohio, and sentenced to life in prison. He was described as a sane man, in full control of his actions. In February 1992, Dahmer arrived at Columbia Correctional Institution in Portage, Wisconsin, to start his sentence. Due to extensive media coverage of his crimes and the gruesome nature of his murders, other inmates were well aware of who Jeffrey Dahmer was, making him a natural target within the facility. Considering this, prison officials decided it would be safer to keep Dahmer away from the general population to prevent another inmate from seeking notoriety by attacking the infamous serial killer. Initially, Dahmer was placed in solitary confinement and required to be shackled when he wasn't in his cell. However, during his first year, Dahmer behaved well and was considered a model prisoner. As a result, when he requested more freedom, his request was granted, and he was transferred out of isolation to a unit with inmates who had emotional issues. There, he was given the opportunity to attend classes, participate in communal meals, and perform various work duties within the correctional facility. And while on the surface he seemed to build positive relationships with his fellow inmates, the increased and often unsupervised interaction with others became strained, as his insensitive, sick behaviour irritated his fellow prisoners. Dahmer appeared to relish his notoriety and frequently engaged in morbid jokes with other inmates about his past crimes. He would often taunt prisoners and guards, saying, "I bite," to see their reaction. In one disturbing instance, he put up a sign advertising a meeting for Cannibals Anonymous. He also reportedly would mould prison food to resemble body parts or severed limbs, with ketchup used as blood. The fake body parts at dinner in particular unnerved his inmates. Due to conflicts with other prisoners stemming from his troubling behaviour, Dahmer was assigned a guard to accompany him at all times. During his brief time incarcerated, Dahmer devoted a significant amount of his time to religious study. His father, a devout born-again Christian, had provided him with various religious materials, which sparked his interest in exploring faith. Consequently, he enrolled in a Bible correspondence course where he delved into the teachings and principles of Christianity. In the spring of 1994, Jeffrey Dahmer expressed a desire to fully embrace Christianity and undergo a religious conversion, and in May of that year, he participated in a baptism ceremony, donning white garments to symbolize his newfound faith. The baptism took place in a whirlpool bath within the prison. However, many people remained skeptical about the authenticity of the killer's newfound faith. Given his background as a manipulative individual known for using his intelligence to evade capture, doubts about his sincerity were voiced. Despite this skepticism, Dahmer demonstrated a notable commitment to his faith, by regularly meeting with the pastor who baptized him for weekly Bible study sessions. But even at church, Dahmer was not completely safe from attack. During a chapel service in July 1994, another inmate attempted to slash Dahmer's throat with a homemade weapon, but the blade broke, leaving Dahmer only with a scratch. After the incident, Dahmer was placed in temporary isolation, but he did not want to stay there and explained that his attacker, who was Cuban, had likely been trying to get deported back to his home country. Surprisingly, prison officials accepted this explanation and classified the incident as an isolated occurrence, allowing Dahmer to return to the general population. However, it wasn't long before Dahmer faced another attack. On the morning of November 28, 1994, Dahmer was assigned to a cleaning duty, a task he had begun 3 weeks earlier. Accompanying him were 2 fellow inmates, Jesse Anderson and Christopher Scarver. The 3 men were left unattended and unshackled for about 20 minutes to clean the gym bathroom. During this period, Scarver was filling his mop and bucket when one of the men poked him in the back. He didn't see who it was, but the poke angered him. He turned around and saw Anderson and Dahmer laughing under their breath. Scarver glared at both men, trying to figure out which one was responsible. The men then separated, and Scarver, who had reportedly kept a newspaper clipping about Dahmer's crimes in his pocket, grabbed a 20-inch, 5-pound metal bar from the gym. He then followed Dahmer into a staff locker room and confronted him about the crimes outlined in the newspaper clipping. Dahmer appeared shocked by the question and started to look for the door to escape, but Scarver blocked him and beat him with the metal bar and slammed his head against the wall. Scarver then quickly made his way to the other locker room and did the same to Anderson. When the guards returned, they found Dahmer on the bathroom floor with severe head wounds. He was hospitalized and pronounced dead an hour later, aged 34, and Anderson died 2 days after the attack. Scarver was later asked about his motivations for what he did, and he explained that it went beyond Dahmer's behavior while incarcerated. He crossed the line with some people, prisoners and prison staff, saying, "Some inmates show remorse, but he was not one of them." He also raised the question of whether prison personnel, who usually shadowed Dahmer, had left them alone on purpose. Others believe Dahmer had a death wish, as during his sentencing in 1992, he stated, "I never wanted freedom. Frankly, I want death for myself." He also told his pastor, "I think I should have been put to death by the state for what I did." Dahmer's choice to join the general prison population led some who were familiar with him to speculate that he was intentionally seeking death while incarcerated. Following the fatal attack against him, his attorney Gerald Boyle remarked, "Dahmer had a death wish, and I know he didn't have the courage to end his life himself. I predicted that the day would come when he would be killed in prison." The public's reaction to Dahmer's death was divided. Many were relieved that his reign of terror had finally come to an end, while others were frustrated that he was not alive to endure punishment in prison for the atrocities he had committed. Dahmer's own parents were even split in their decision to his death. According to the Washington Post, Dahmer's mother, Joyce, wanted to preserve her son's brain for scientific studies into his behavior, while his father, Lionel, wanted it cremated with the rest of his body. They had a long time to decide, as nothing could be done with their son's body until Christopher Scarver was sentenced for beating and killing him. During the wait, in scenes mirroring what he did to his victims, Dahmer's brain was removed and preserved in formaldehyde until a decision was made on what to do with it. On September 17, 1995, nearly a year after his brutal death, Dahmer's remains were cremated without his brain. His father Lionel claimed half of the ashes, while his mother Joyce had the other half. A court hearing regarding Dahmer's brain was scheduled for a later date, and ultimately the ruling sided with his father, and the brain was released for cremation. For the families of Dahmer's victims, their nightmare will never be over, and although the prison murder marked the physical end for Jeffrey Dahmer, his notoriety ensures that his name will endure in history for many years to come through books, videos, and films, and he will forever be remembered as one of the most heinous serial killers ever.